Captain Elias Marlowe guided the Aurora's light toward the barren moon in the Alpha Centauri system, with steady hands. He had flown many missions, but something felt different this time. The sensors on his ship picked up a faint biosignature, so weak that it almost looked like a glitch. He leaned forward in his pilot seat, eyes fixed on the flickering readout. Clouds of red dust swirled over the rocky surface below, hiding what lay beneath. Elias adjusted the ship's thrusters and set down on a flat clearing near what appeared to be the ruins of an old settlement. Stepping from the shuttle, Elias felt a rush of cold, dry air. The sky above was a dull, rusted orange, and the horizon seemed endless. Broken metal frames of shelters and collapsed towers formed a jagged skyline. He wore his standard exploration suit, a lightweight white material that kept him safe from toxins and provided oxygen. Each breath hissed through his helmet as he activated his handheld scanner. The device beeped softly, and the signal strength rose and fell like a heartbeat. Elias moved slowly among the debris, checking each corner for movement. Bones lay scattered near a collapsed wall, and fragments of alien technology littered the ground. He had expected the worst, perhaps no living being at all. When he reached a half-buried structure that might once have been a home, the scanner's light turned solid green. Elias crouched and swept aside layers of dust and rubble. There, curled into a tight ball, was a small alien girl. Her skin was pale green and looked almost translucent in the dim light. 4 thin arms were wrapped around her chest, as if she tried to stay warm against the cold winds. Her eyes were half open, glowing faintly like embers. She wore tattered cloth that hardly covered her chest and hips. Elias knelt and gently placed his hand near her shoulder. The moment she felt his warmth, her eyes opened fully. They were full of fear and hunger. Elias said softly, "You are safe now." He eased a small ration pack near her lips. She took a trembling bite, the food slipping from her fingers as she ate. Despite strict orders to observe and not interfere, Elias could not leave her to die. He lifted the girl very carefully and carried her back to Aurora's light. Inside, the shuttle's cabin. He laid her on a padded medical couch. Her breathing was shallow, and small flecks of dirt fell from her tangled hair. Elias closed the hatch and sealed the airlock behind him. The ship's engines roared to life, shaking. The floor beneath him. He ran to the onboard medical bay, clearing a path through cables and equipment. The bedraggled girl was now unconscious. He placed her gently on the examination table and scanned her vitals. All signs pointed to severe malnourishment and exhaustion. Elias pressed a button to summon the ship's medical droid, and soft lights bathed the room in a gentle glow. The droid extended 4 thin arms, each tipped with a variety of medical tools. It beeped and hummed as it took blood samples and measured vital signs. Elias watched, his heart heavy. He felt responsible for this creature he barely understood. The alien girl was tiny compared to a human child, barely a meter in height with long limbs and bioluminescent filaments along her scalp that blinked softly. Elias's knowledge of alien biology was limited, but he knew these filaments were part of her nervous system. Any damage could be fatal. He fed her a slow drip of nutrient gel through a small tube. Her body twitched as the food entered her veins. He monitored her heart rate on the screen, hoping it would rise. Outside the window, the barren moon fell away as Aurora's light broke through the dusty atmosphere. The stars shone brightly beyond. Elias activated the ship's synthesis unit to produce a diet rich in algae protein and simple carbohydrates, foods that might match her unknown metabolism. He remembered reading about the Thalari species in an old data log. They were known to survive on a mix of light and organic matter. This girl, he guessed, was a Thalari. As the ship glided into open space, Elias stayed by her side. Her breaths grew deeper, and her skin color shifted from pale green to a faint, healthy hue. He felt a small spark of hope. Hours later, she opened her eyes and stared at him with wide pupils the size of saucers. Her filaments glowed brighter, and she tried to push herself up. Elias gently pressed her back down. He spoke softly but clearly. "You are safe. I am Elias. You are not alone." She blinked and tried to say something in a language he did not understand. He shook his head to indicate he could not follow her words. Then he activated a simple translation program on his wrist device. It responded with static and mismatched phrases, but he played a gentle tone of Terran music to calm her. Tears formed in her eyes as she listened. Elias watched her face as she recognized kindness. She traced trembling patterns in the air, making shapes of circles and lines that glowed briefly. Elias copied each shape with his scanner, storing them in the ship's memory. He did not yet understand their meaning, but he felt certain they held her story. He turned toward the viewport and glanced at the stars. In that moment, he made a silent promise. He would do everything he could to help her survive. The girl, whom he later learned was named Vesha, lay back on the cushion, exhausted but calm. Elias dimmed the medical bay lights and stepped back. He looked at her once more, his face set with determination. He would need to fight his own doubts and face many challenges ahead. But for now, the simple act of rescue filled him with purpose. As Aurora's light sailed farther from the moon, Elias whispered to himself, "You will live." Captain Elias Marlowe watched over the small bulkhead window as the stars passed by like silent witnesses to his mission. In the dim glow of the medical bay, the alien girl lay on the padded table. Her breathing was steady now, though still shallow. Elias adjusted the nutrient drip to a slower rate. He had named her Vesha, a name he chose from the Thalari language database after finding a reference to a word meaning hope. Vesha stirred her forearms and slowly opened her amber eyes. They blinked against the bright lights. Elias knelt beside her and offered a small vial of clear liquid. It was water mixed with electrolytes, a gentle way to rehydrate. Vesha curled her fingers around the vial and drank with trembling lips. As she swallowed, Elias spoke in calm, clear words. "It is safe. I am here to help you." Vesha's gaze focused on Elias's face. She did not speak his tongue, so Elias switched on the translation module in his wrist device. He adjusted its language settings to Thalari Basic, though he knew the translation would be slow and imperfect. The device crackled to life and attempted to render his next words into her alien speech. "You are on a safe ship now." The device sputtered and produced stilted phrases. Vesha's lips curled into a confused smile. She tried to answer, but her words came out as gentle chimes in a melody. Elias listened closely. He recorded her sounds, then replayed them through his device, hoping to find patterns he could study. Each attempt produced strange words with no clear meaning. Frustration flickered in Vesha's eyes, but Elias held up a hand to calm her. He nodded and said simply, "I will learn your words." When Vesha had enough energy, Elias moved her to a low table where thin mats held soft photosynthetic moss and small trays of synthesized food. He had spoken to Dr. Naomi Clark before the mission, asking for special rations that could feed a variety of unknown species. Now those rations were life-saving. Vesha reached out with her forearms to touch the moss. The tiny leaves glowed faintly under the lamp's ultraviolet rays. She inhaled slowly, as if drawing life from the bioluminescent plants. Elias watched her carefully. He had read that Thalari could derive part of their nutrition through less of forests, rivers, and stars. He tapped on the image of a forest. The screen displayed forest. Vesha's eyes widened, and she placed a delicate hand on the glass. She made a soft sound, like a sigh or a delighted hum. Elias brought up the image of a river. He tapped the word water. Vesha's face lit up. She pointed to her heart and then to the window that looked out onto the galaxy. Elias typed home and held the screen toward her. She closed her eyes and leaned her head back. At that moment, Elias understood two things. First, Vesha longed to remember and speak of her home, a place now lost. Second, she needed not just food and water, but the language of her people. He promised himself he would learn as much as he could. Over the next day, Elias created a simple lesson plan. He gathered pictures from the ship's library, a Terran oak tree, a Terran river, and a Terran sunrise. He also grabbed any file he could find in the database labeled Thalari culture and printed out basic symbols and translations. He arranged them on a digital whiteboard in the medical bay. When Vesha awoke from her rest, he guided her to the whiteboard. He tapped on the oak tree image and said, "Tree." Vesha paced her long fingers around the screen, touching the trunk, tracing the leaves. She made a sound low and steady, which Elias recorded as Ra. He tapped a button to tag that phrase as tree. Next, he tapped the image of a river and said water. Vesha repeated a similar hum but with a rising tone. Niala. He saved water in his notes. Finally, he showed her the stars, a wide view of deep space. Vesha's filaments on her head glowed softly, and she whispered something long and drawn. Shionika. Elias recorded stars. Vesha's expression shifted from hope to sadness. She tapped Shionika on the board and pointed behind her, toward her curled legs. Elias understood. She missed her home beneath. Those twin Thalari stars, his chest tie, tend. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Although Vesha could not see it, she felt the warmth. He spoke slowly. "You will speak many words again. We will find another world like yours." Vesha stared at him, fear and wonder mingling in her eyes. Then she did something Elias did not expect. She placed a thin hand over his on her shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. For Elias, this gesture was more powerful than any report or data. It meant Vesha trusted him. In her culture, this simple act must carry a heavy meaning, perhaps one of gratitude and acceptance. Elias allowed himself a small smile. He would not fail her. That evening, Elias turned off the lab lights and activated the ship's external cameras. Together with Vesha, he watched the moon recede into dust clouds below. Vesha whispered, "Shionika again," her voice softer this time. Elias replied with the slow, careful words, "Stars guide us." The translation device sputtered out, the Thalari phrase for guide, something like varita. As Vesha drifted to sleep, Elias wrote new notes in his log. Begin cultural study day 1. He intended to learn as many Thalari words as possible. He felt a growing sense of respect and responsibility. The bond between them was fragile but real. In the silence of the medical bay, with the stars rolling past outside, both human and alien drifted into dreams, Elias dreaming of a shared future, in which language and kindness could rebuild a broken people, and Vesha dreaming of a home she might one day walk through again. Captain Elias Marlowe stood beside the low-lit hollow table in the medical bay, as Vesha traced glowing lines in the air. Each symbol she made hovered for a moment before fading like a spark. Elias watched every movement. He had loaded the table with images of forests, lakes, and tall, white towers, drawings from the old Thalari archives. He wanted her to see that humans had records of her lost world, Thalaris Prime. Vesha's forearms moved in careful patterns. She sketched a tree with twisting roots, then a shining lake with ripples. A tall spire rose above the water. Her filaments on her scalp glowed brighter with each image. Elias pressed a button and the hollow table saved her sketches as files. He labeled them Espis for tree, Nerea for lake, and Kalar for spire. He did not know if these were correct words, but Vesha repeated each name with a soft, Espis, Nerea, Kalor. After she finished, Vesha leaned back and exhaled a slow, shimmering breath. Elias asked, "Do these make you remember?" Vesha closed her eyes and nodded. Tears formed at the corner of her amber eyes. Elias felt a tight pain in his chest. He reached out and offered her a small cloth. She pressed it to her mouth, sniffing. Elias showed her a hollow image of Thalaris Prime from the archives, an artist's rendering based on lost data. He tapped a button and the view shifted to a virtual sunrise over a field of tall grasses that glowed violet in the early light. Vesha gasped and placed her hands over her face. She spoke a long phrase in Thalari, Kalinera Vesh. Elias did not yet fully understand, but he knew it was love for a home that no longer existed. He gently said, Your home was beautiful. We will keep its memory. Vesha looked at him, her filaments dimming to a soft pulse. She made another symbol in the air, a circle with many rays. Elias captured it and labeled it sun. He tapped the word sun on the hollow table. Vesha repeated the word slowly. Shinon. Now Elias had 4 new words in his list. Espis, Neria, Kalor, and Shinon. He wrote them carefully, in a small data book. He realized that Vesha was a living bridge to a world gone forever. She carried its stories in her heart. Over the next day, Elias and Vesha worked together. Elias built a small hydroponic bay in a quiet corner of the ship. He assembled transparent tanks filled with water, nutrient solution, and a thin layer of bioluminescent moss. He hung a soft white lamp over the tanks. The moss glowed like moonlight. He believed this light would help Vesha's thalari cells regenerate energy. He watched as Vesha behind him prepared trays of simple foods, a paste made from algae and synthesized protein, plus small pieces of soft fruit. When Vesha finished setting up, she knelt by the hydroponic tanks. She placed her hands just above the moss and hummed a low tune. The moss pulsed faintly as if responding to her. Elias watched her face. Her skin, now a gentle emerald shade, took on an almost serene glow from the hydraulic lights. She touched a lily-like bloom that floated on the water. Her fingers traced the petals. Elias felt hope in his chest. He needed to help her recover the strength she had lost on that barren moon. Elias removed a broken lamp from the bay's overhead frame. Its glass cover was cracked and wires stuck out. He handed the lamp to Vesha. "Can you fix this?" he asked. Vesha examined the lamp with intent focus. Her forearms moved swiftly. One hand held a small tool, another guided a wire. The third held a tiny soldering component, and the fourth steadied the broken socket. In moments, she had the lamp reassembled and functional. Light flooded the hydroponic bay. Elias felt a surge of pride. Her skill was incredible. A human technician might have taken much longer. Vesha turned and smiled at Elias, her eyes bright. She pointed at the moss below. Elias began taking readings with his scanner. The tank's nutrient levels stabilized, and the moss began a steady growth pattern. He noted the data. Hydroponic bay growth rate, 23% increase in 12 hours. Elias typed it into the ship's logs. Vesha leaned over and touched his arm. He looked at her and nodded. That evening, Elias arranged a small meal on a tray, a combination of Terran fruits and a taste of the thalari paste. He included simple bread he had baked in the ship's oven. Vesha sat across from him on a low stool. She took a small piece of bread and looked at it curiously. Elias pointed to the loaf and said, "Bread." The translation module crunched data, but offered no clear outcome. Vesha bit into the bread and chewed slowly. Her face softened with surprise. She held her forearms out, offering thanks in her own way. Elias folded his hands in a simple Terran gesture of calm. They took turns eating and making symbols. Elias showed her how humans use spoons, forks, and knives. Vesha laughed in a gentle trill as she tried to use a fork with all 4 arms. The tines slipped from her grip. Elias laughed too, and showed her how to hold it between only 2 arms. She tried, again, and succeeded. The moment felt small yet profound, a shared memory in a universe often so cold and lonely. Later, Vesha brought out a small cloth pouch filled with glass beads, family heirlooms, she explained through gestures. Each bead was painted with tiny dots and lines. She placed them one by one on the hollow table. Elias watched as she arranged the beads in a pattern, a star with 4 points, each point leading to a small circle. Vesha's filaments glowed softly as she looked at the pattern, and she whispered, "Shionika Valray." Elias tapped the hollow table, and it displayed, "Stars guide us home." He felt a lump in his throat. He gently put his hand over his heart and said, "Yes." Vesha closed her eyes and rested her head on her hands. Elias understood that she thanked him for giving her a new path. They sat in silence, the strange lights of the hydroponic bay creating shifting patterns on the walls. Outside the porthole, stars drifted slowly through the darkness. In those hours, their bond grew stronger. Vesha taught Elias more words. Sky was Tira, wind was Loon, and friend was Mera. Elias' list of Thalari words filled another page. He realized that language was not just words. It was a bridge between hearts. When Vesha finally climbed onto a padded cot to rest, Elias dimmed the bay lights. He sat at his desk, writing a new entry. Day 7. Vesha shows signs of memory recovery and cultural strength. Hydroponic bay is successful. Trust deepening. He paused and looked at Vesha's calm face. She slept peacefully, her filaments pulsing with a soft glow. Elias turned away quietly and left the room. Stepping into the corridor's gentle hum, he walked toward his quarters. He felt a flicker of determination. He had learned that to help Vesha heal, he needed to honor her past and build her future. In the quiet of the ship, amid engines and metal walls, a tiny spark of hope flared. A hope that with compassion and effort, two very different beings could learn to speak the same language of care. Captain Elias Marlowe stood by the large viewport as the Aurora's light drifted through the silent depths of space. In the medical bay behind him, Vesha sat on a padded mat, her forearms folded against her chest. Her filaments glowed gently under the soft overhead lights. Elias walked back to her side, carrying a small holoscreen with images of Thalaris Prime's ancient ceremonies. He remembered how her eyes had widened at the sight of the white spires and violet fields. He placed the holoscreen on a low table and tapped to play a short recording of a traditional Thalari melody. The soft, flowing notes filled the room. Vesha closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. As the final notes faded, Elias spoke in gentle tones. "You seem to remember this song." She opened her eyes and nodded, then drew a single glowing symbol in the air. It looked like a circle with a small star inside. Elias scanned the symbol and labeled it ceremony. Vesha's breaths grew shallow as she prepared to speak. Elias leaned closer, trying to follow her quiet Thalari words. The translation module he carried on his wrist was not perfect, but he managed to capture a rough meaning. Lineage, children, future. He looked at her, surprised. Vesha's forearms moved into a posture Elias recognized from the few cultural notes. He had gathered it was a gesture of deep sincerity. Eli sat down in front of her and opened his small data book. He tapped on the page where he had written new Thalari words. Lineage he had not yet translated, but now he needed to learn this word. He spoke slowly, in common intergalactic tongue. "Vesha, I want to understand." He tapped his wrist device to record her next phrase and played it back slowly, listening. The device produced a broken phrase. "Vesha wants child with Elias." Elias's heart paused. He did not know how to reply. He gently placed his hand on his chin and looked at Vesha's soft gaze. She lowered her head and drew another symbol, this time 2 circles joined by a curved line. Elias scanned it and saved it as union. He tapped the hologram of a Thalari ceremony scene, where 2 figures shared energy through their filaments. Vesha spoke again, and the translation module tried to keep up. Union of necessity. Elias took a breath. He remembered reading a note in the Thalari Cultural Archive. Long ago, when a Thalari colony fell, the last survivors performed the union of necessity to preserve their line. They combined their genetic essence to create a new life in a crystalline seed. It was not a human marriage or birth process. It was a ritual of blending DNA and energy in a special vessel. He looked at Vesha. Her eyes were bright and earnest. She whispered her next phrase and Elias captured it. Elias, only one, can give future. He felt a mix of awe and uncertainty. Vesha was asking him to help her perform this ancient ritual. If it worked, her species could continue through, a half-Thalari child. Elias understood the weight of her plea. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them, he spoke as clearly as he could. This ritual, It is too complex for me. I am not a Thalari. Vesha's shoulders drooped. Her filaments dimmed with sadness. She tapped the holoscreen, selecting an image showing the ritual vessel, an oval container filled with glowing liquid. She traced a path from the vessel to herself, then from the vessel to Elias. Elias watched the connection drawn in midair. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Elias knew his duty was to help Vesha in every way he could, yet he also felt the weight of ethical questions. He pressed a finger to his wrist device and spoke into the microphone. Record note. Vesha requests union of necessity. Need research on genetic compatibility and ethical guidelines. The device beeped and saved the note. Vesha, seeing his hesitation, placed a gentle hand on his arm. Elias felt her warmth and compassion. He said softly, I will look for knowledge. Tell me more. Vesha's eyes brightened. She drew a simple star symbol and repeated the word Shionika for stars. Then she traced a straight line down to a small circle. Elias realized she was asking for a path forward, a way to reach the future she dreamed of. Elias spent the next hours in the ship's data archives. He found old reports from Terran xenobiologists who had studied Thalari genetics. The note said human and Thalari DNA shared a small sequence, an ancient remnant from a universal ancestor. In theory, hybridization might be possible, but the risks were unknown. Birth defects, immune rejection, even loss of the child's sentience. Elias opened a blank report in his databook and wrote, Thalari human genetic synthesis, high. Risk, unknown outcomes. Requires advanced genetic therapy. Back in the medical bay, Vesha waited quietly. Her filaments pulsed slowly. When Elias entered, she rose to her knees. He approached and presented a holoscreen showing a chart of Thalari, genetic markers and human gene sequences. He pointed to a column where both genomes shared a matching pattern. Vesha traced Elias's finger. He tapped more notes. Compatible markers. 23% overlap. Requires lab tests. Vesha placed a small pouch on the table. Inside, a single crystal, bead. It was one of her heirlooms. She tapped the bead and then tapped Elias's heart. Elias took a breath and gently picked up the bead. Its smooth surface felt cool. He nodded and spoke. I will not abandon you. I will try. Vesha's eyes glowed brighter. She leaned forward and touched his hand with a quiet gratitude. The next day, Elias found Dr. Naomi Clark in the research lab. He told her Vesha's request and showed the genetic data. Naomi's eyes widened. She reminded him, even if we can combine DNA safely, we don't know how the child might be affected. It could suffer greatly. Elias held his gaze steady. I know the risk, he said, but Vesha is nearly alone in the galaxy. If we fail, at least we tried to carry her line. Naomi sighed and agreed to help. She began designing experiments to test hybrid cell cultures in the lab. Meanwhile, Elias returned to Vesha and shared the plan. They would grow a small sample of cells from Elias's blood and Vesha's skin in a bioreactor chamber. If the cells combined successfully, they could consider moving forward. Vesha understood, enough to nod. She tapped a final circle in the air. Hope. Elias wrote that word in his data book with a steady hand. As Vesha rested that night, Elias stayed by her side. He reached out and gently held her forearms. She looked at him with trust and whispered, Thank you. Elias pressed his hand to his chest. He softly replied, You are not alone. In the quiet glow of the medical bay, two very different beings shared a promise to seek a future together, even in a universe filled with unknown dangers. Captain Elias Marlowe walked the narrow corridor of the Aurora's light toward the research lab. The hum of the ship's engines filled the air. He clutched a small tray of samples, a vial of his own blood serum and a tiny skin swab that Vesha had offered willingly. He had not slept well. His mind replayed Vesha's hopeful eyes as she placed the silver bead in his hand. Now he needed to work quickly, before any possible complications. In the lab, Dr. Naomi Clark stood over a sleek bioreactor chamber. Clear walls revealed tiny cells floating in a light-colored solution. Naomi greeted Elias with a nod. "We can begin the hybrid test now," she said. "If these cells fuse correctly, we'll know if the union of necessity has any chance." Elias set the samples on the stainless steel table. He felt a knot in his stomach. He and Naomi had discussed all the risks. The child might never develop fully, or worse, it might suffer from serious defects. Yet Vesha's need to preserve her line outweighed those dangers. Naomi placed the vial of Elias's blood in the reactor and added a drop of growth medium. Then she inserted Vesha's skin sample. The digital display showed cell images multiplying in real time. "I have filtered out any known human viral markers," Naomi explained, "but we cannot be certain of all unknown Thalari pathogens." Elias watched the cells swirl in the pale blue light. "Understood," he said quietly. Then Naomi tapped a button and engaged the mixing sequence. The reactor's small motor began to stir the solution gently. As they worked, alarms in the corridor sounded abruptly. A red light blinked above the lab door. Elias and Naomi exchanged worried glances. "Security breach," Naomi said. She hit a command to lock down the lab automatically. Elias clicked off the reactor stirrer and stowed the samples in a secure compartment. They rushed into the corridor. On the bulkhead monitor, they saw two figures wearing black armor, their faces hidden behind visored helmets. One held a pulse rifle that glowed with a pale green light. Elias's heart pounded. "Raiders," he muttered. He recognized the insignia on their helmets, a skull-shaped symbol associated with the Orion Wraiths, smugglers known for trafficking rare alien specimens. Naomi activated her wrist communicator. "Elias," she whispered, "we must protect the samples and Vesha." The raiders moved down the corridor's length at a slow, steady pace, their footsteps echoing against the metal floor. Elias nodded. He slid his hand over the biometric panel next to the lab door. It clicked open. He and Naomi slipped inside. Inside the lab, they sealed the door. The reactor room was now locked behind reinforced bulkheads. Naomi accessed a control panel and initiated the lab's white noise generators. The raiders could not hear their conversation. Elias tapped a code on his wrist device. "Divert all power to the medical bay force field," he ordered. Naomi complied. A shield glowed around the doors leading to the medical bay where Vesha rested. Outside the lab, the raiders tried to override the door. The panel sparked, but it held. Elias and Naomi watched through the window. The raiders scanned the locks and finally moved on. They must have assumed the lab was empty. Elias exhaled slowly. "That was close," he whispered. Naomi placed a hand on his shoulder. "They were looking for Vesha. They know she is worth a fortune." Elias nodded. He felt anger in his chest. People who would harm a child for profit were as far from human kindness as one could imagine. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Vesha slept in a low bunk bed. Her filaments glowed in a pattern that matched her breathing. The hydroponic bay hummed softly nearby. Unseen by her, the raiders had injected a hidden drone into the hydroponic nutrient line in their attempt to find her. The drone carried a viral payload designed to kill Thalari cells. It was one more tool in the raiders' cruel arsenal. Back in the lab, Naomi typed quickly on a console to access the ship's internal sensors. "Elias," she said, "there is a small drone in the nutrient line. It has released a viral agent." Elias's face turned pale. "Then we must act fast." He grabbed Naomi's arm. "We need to save Vesha." They dashed through the corridor, toward the medical bay. The bulkhead lights flickered as the engines shifted power toward defensive systems. In the medical bay, the force field shimmered at the vestibule. Elias deactivated the field and entered. The air smelled faintly of ozone. Veshasle, PT peacefully, but her vitals monitor beeped sharply. Her heart rate had spiked. Red dots on the screen indicated rising body temperature. Naomi rushed to Vesha's side. She checked her IV line. Vesha's skin was warm to the touch. The viral agent was already attacking her cells. Naomi knelt and ran a quick analysis on her portable scanner. She is being infected, Naomi said, her voice tight. We have minutes at best to find an antiviral agent. Elias looked at the hydroponic bay. The moss glowed faintly, but now it looked dull and lifeless. Naomi tapped a console to open the ship's medical database. She searched for known antivirals that might work on Thalari physiology. The list was short. One compound, derived from a Terran immunoglobulin, showed promise. It could be modified with a Thalari protein analog to boost effectiveness. Elias and Naomi had to produce the compound on board. Naomi gave Elias precise instructions. We need to combine the Terran immunofilter enzyme with this Thalari protein binder. It will form a nanocarrier that targets her cells. She pointed to the formula on the screen. The process was delicate. One wrong measurement could kill Vesha. Elias took a deep breath and moved to the synthesizer station. He loaded the enzyme cartridge, then carefully weighed out the Thalari protein powder that Vesha had provided earlier. He measured each gram, under Naomi's watchful gaze. She guided him. Add 10 milliliters of saline, then stir at 45 rotations per minute for 2 minutes. Elias followed each step precisely. On the console, a progress bar began to fill. The mixture glowed, with a pale green light. Naomi tapped her keypad. Now add microencapsulated lipids. Elias added the lipids from a small vial. The solution turned translucent and the console beeped. It's ready, he said, voice trembling. Naomi filled a syringe with the antiviral solution. Hold her steady, she said. Elias placed a hand on Vesha's shoulder. He could feel her weakness. Naomi inserted the needle into the IV line and delivered the compound. Vesha's body jolted as if protesting, then lay still. They watched her monitors. The heart rate began to slow from a frantic 140 beats per minute to a more normal 110. Her temperature started to drop. Naomi and Elias exchanged relieved looks. It's working, Naomi said softly. As Vesha's vitals stabilized, her filaments glowed again with a soft green pulse. She whimpered in her sleep, but the pain seemed to ease. Elias brushed a lock of emerald hair from her forehead. Stay with us, he whispered. Outside the window, stars appeared as gentle pinpoints of light. The Aurora's light had pushed the raiders away with defensive maneuvers. In the medical bay, a quiet calm settled. Vesha's breathing evened out, and her hands unclenched. Elias and Naomi stepped back and let the medical droid take over Vesha's care. The droid's arms hovered over her, scanning for any lingering threats in her bloodstream. Elias watched the droid's display, which showed the antiviral molecules binding to the viral agents and neutralizing them. He turned to Naomi. We protected her, for now. Naomi nodded. We have more work ahead. We must continue hybrid research and guard against more attacks. Elias closed his eyes briefly, then opened them and stared at Vesha. She was sleeping but stable. He felt a fierce protection rising inside him. In that silent moment, a promise formed in his mind. He would not let Vesha perish. He would face any danger, scientific or otherwise, to give her a chance at life. As the ship drifted through silent space, Elias realized that compassion had led him here, to fight not only for one small alien girl, but for a future neither of them could yet fully see. Captain Elias Marlowe stood in the medical bay and watched Vesha's chest rise and fall, in a steady rhythm. After Naomi's antiviral treatment, Vesha's color returned to a healthy emerald green. The bioluminescent filaments on her scalp pulsed with a gentle glow. Elias felt relief wash over him. He reached out and touched her hand lightly. Vesha's eyes fluttered open and she offered him a small, grateful smile. Elias spoke softly. You are safe now. The virus is leaving your body. Vesha tried to breathe deeply, as if testing her lungs. She nodded once, then tried to speak in her own language. Although her voice was weak, Elias caught a few fragments. Nalra. Nasus. He tapped his wrist device. The translation module sputtered, but he understood it as thank you and life returns. He squeezed her hand gently. You are strong, he said. Rest now. Dr. Clark will watch over you. Vesha closed her eyes and drifted back, to sleep. Ilias stepped back but stayed near the door. He saw the medical droid checking her vitals again, its slender arms moving with precise movements. Outside, the soft hum of the ship's engines was a steady reminder that they still floated in deep space. After a time, Elias left the medical bay and walked down a quiet corridor to the lab. Dr. Naomi Clark was already there, studying a set of computer screens. The small bioreactor chamber sat on a reinforced table, its display showing stable green light. She is recovering, Ilias said. Naomi nodded but did not look away from the screens. We have a chance now, Naomi said. Her cells responded well to the antiviral. No signs of residual infection. But we still need to test the hybrid cell cultures. If they grow properly, we can move forward toward the union of necessity. Elias leaned over the console and read the data. The hybrid cell cultures showed a 30% combination rate. Some cells fused, but many did not survive. He frowned. We need a better growth solution. The bioreactor medium may lack a specific thalari nutrient. Naomi tapped a few keys. I will adjust the glucose concentration and add a trace element found in her homeworld soil samples. I have data from the archives that lists 3 rare minerals: vescium, neriolite, and cheraphosphor. We need to simulate at least one of those in our medium. Elias thought for a moment. We have neriolite in small crystals stored in the hydroponic bay. I retrieved them from Vesha's pouch. He motioned to a clear tray on the table where a few sparkling green grains rested. Naomi's eyes lit up. Perfect. Those crystals may provide the right environment for thalari cells to thrive. Let's prepare a new batch. Together, they mixed a fresh solution. Naomi poured a measured amount of synthesized proteins and human growth factors into a sterile beaker. Elias measured a small quantity of neriolite crystals, crushed them into a fine powder, and added them to the mixture. As the crystals dissolved, the liquid took on a pale, luminescent tint. Naomi filled the react, remembered that Tira meant sky and Shionika meant stars. The phrase could mean sky of stars or world among the stars. Elias felt a pang of sadness for her lost home, but also a thrill that her language and memory still lived within her. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We will find a world for you, he said. We will carry your story. Vesha offered him a gentle smile and closed her eyes. Elias stayed by her side a while, watching as the soft rise and fall of her breath returned to normal. The next morning, when the ship's natural light cycle signaled dawn, Elias and Naomi gathered around the lab's console. The bioreactor display now showed vibrant activity. Tiny hybrid cells glimmered under close-up imaging. Elias could see clusters forming where thalari and human cell membranes fused smoothly. Naomi pointed to the data readout. Fusion rate, 55%. Cell viability, 80%. Growth rate normalized. Elias allowed himself a small smile. This is more than I hoped, he said. We have a foundation for the next step. Naomi nodded. We need to plan for an embryo vessel. A thalari ovogen chamber calibrated for hybrid DNA. The ship does not have one, but the Proxima Genetic Consortium on Proxima B may have the necessary equipment. Elias straightened. Set a course for Proxima B, Naomi. We must reach them as soon as possible. Naomi tapped the navigation panel. Course plotted. We will arrive in 72 hours. Elias nodded, and then placed a gentle hand on the reactor. Thank you, he whispered, for helping Vesha's line live on. With the hybrid cells prospering, Vesha grew stronger by the hour. In the medical bay, she practiced more thalari phrases with Elias's guidance. Mera for friend, Nalia for family, Valra for future. Each word silked through the air like a promise. Elias taught her small phrases of common intergalactic tongue in return. Ship, stars, safe. They shared laughter when Vesha tried to say computer, stumbling over the sounds until she managed a near-perfect computer. Meanwhile, the hydroponic bay thrived. Under Vesha's gentle care, the bioluminescent moss formed lush mats that glowed in patterns. Elias watched as she trimmed the leaves and released new spores into the water. The green light reflected in her eyes as she whispered, Neria, life. Elias typed that phrase into his databook. One day he thought humans and Thalari might share a field of moss like this on a new planet. As Proxima b crept up on the view screen, Elias gathered Vesha and Naomi in the common area. The planet's blue-green surface rotated slowly below, its rings glinting in the star's light. Elias placed a reassuring hand on Vesha's arm. Tomorrow we arrive. The consortium will have the vessel we need. Vesha's filaments glowed brightly in excitement. She reached out to touch his hand. Elias smiled and said, Your future is within reach. In the hush of the ship's final hours before Proxima b, Elias reflected on how far they had come. From a chance rescue on a barren moon to this moment of promise, Vesha's life had become entwined with his own. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also a deep joy in knowing that compassion had carried them this far. Captain Elias Marlowe guided the Aurora's light into orbit around Proxima b. Below them, the planet's turquoise oceans shifted beneath cloud curtains. In the lab, Dr. Naomi Clark adjusted the sensors on the sealed airlock door. She had arranged for the ship to dock at the Proxima Genetic Consortium station. Outside the viewport, the station's glowing rings reflected in the ship's hull. Elias found Vesha in the medical bay. She sat on a simple cot, her filaments pulsing with gentle green light. Her skin had regained its deep emerald hue. She looked smaller now that she was stronger, but her presence felt large in Elias's heart. He knelt beside her and set a small tray of soft fruit and hydroponic greens on a low table. Vesha reached out with one of her forearms and touched the fruit. Elias fed her a slice of apple. Vesha chewed slowly, savoring each bite. He spoke softly. Today we find the Ovigen chamber. Vesha looked into his eyes. She nodded once, as if she had waited her whole life for this moment. Elias placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Remember, you are safe, he said. Vesha smiled. She held his hand with two of her arms and placed the other two atop her chest. The gesture meant gratitude and hope. Elias felt a steady warmth spread through him. At the docking bay, the Aurora's light linked with the consortium station. A team of white-coated scientists met them at the airlock. Their leader, Dr. Jorah Malik, bowed slightly to Elias. Welcome to Proxima Genetic Consortium, she said in clear, common intergalactic tongue. Her eyes moved over Vesha with respectful curiosity. Vesha bowed in return. The scientists murmured quietly among themselves. Dr. Malik led them through bright halls of polished metal and transparent panels. Biolabs hummed with soft lights. Technicians, in gray uniforms, tended to vessels that glowed with colored liquids. Agnes, a young technician, guided Elias and Vesha to the Ovigen integration suite. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, a large oval chamber stood at the center. Its glass walls were tinted pale blue. Tubes and wires connected it to consoles on the walls. Elias stepped inside with Vesha by his side. He felt a sense of awe. This chamber was built to nurture a Thalari embryo from its earliest stage. On a nearby console, Dr. Malik explained the controls. This chamber can replicate the Thalari uterine environment. It monitors temperature, pressure, nutrient flow, and light cycles. It can also adjust for human genetic material. She tapped a screen. A menu of protocols appeared. Naomi and Dr. Malik exchanged a quick look. Then Naomi typed commands on her wrist device. The system whirred as it initialized. A soft hum filled the room. Elias felt his heart beating faster. He looked at Vesha. She touched the chamber's cool glass with one delicate hand. Her eyes reflected the blue glow. Elias took a steadying breath. He said, "Let us begin." Vesha nodded. She stepped onto a small platform. Elias stepped up beside her. The platform raised them until they were at the chamber's hatch. Dr. Malik placed a gentle hand on each of their shoulders. She opened the hatch. Warm light spilled onto Vesha's skin. She moved inside the chamber. Elias followed carefully, closing the hatch behind him. Inside, Vesha stood on a soft pad at the chamber's base. The walls shimmered with a faint light that mimicked Thalari sunrise, violet hues shifting to pink. Soft beams of light passed over Vesha's filaments. She inhaled deeply. Elias stood beside her. He held out a small crystalline chalice filled with transparent serum. The serum shimmered with tiny golden specks. Vesha reached out with her forearms. She took the chalice and raised it to her lips. Elias placed his hand on his chest and touched a small vial he held. The vial contained a few drops of his own blood, mixed with careful nanotech carriers designed by Naomi. He held it out to Vesha. She reached out and took the vial. Her fingers shook slightly, but she held it with steady courage. Elias nodded. He said softly, "Thank you for trusting me." Vesha gave a small, serene nod. Together they poured the serum into a shallow basin at the foot of the chamber. Then they dripped Elias's blood carrier solution into the same basin. The mixture glowed faintly as it spread across the base. Vesha closed her eyes and began to chant in soft Thalari syllables. Her voice rose and fell like a gentle tide. Elias repeated a few notes he learned from her earlier. As the ritual chant continued, the chamber's sensors detected energy fluctuations. The glowing basins shifted color from pale gold to warm violet. Tiny tendrils of light rose from the liquid and coalesced in the center. Vesha's filaments glowed brighter, and Elias felt a faint tingling in the air. The energy patterns swirled until they formed a small crystalline seed suspended above the basin. Elias and Vesha both gasped, softly. The seed floated, pulsing with life. Vesha opened her eyes and wiped a tear. She pointed at the seed and whispered, "Ainalor," the Thalari word for future. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "This is our future," he said. Dr. Malik watched from outside through the chamber's viewport. She and Naomi monitored the data. "Hybrid embryo forming normally," Naomi reported. "Genetic stability within acceptable range. Nutrient absorption nominal." Dr. Malik smiled with relief. Inside the chamber, the seed glowed steadily. Vesha knelt and pressed her arms to her chest in a gesture of reverence. Elias knelt beside her and placed a hand over his heart. The soft glow illuminated their faces. In that moment, no one spoke. The silent promise of new life filled the space. After several minutes, the energy current settled. The seed sank gently into a cradle in the basin. Soft light pulsed around it like a heartbeat. Vesha touched the cradle with a trembling hand. Elias placed his forearms over its surface as well, 2 each. They shared a moment of quiet wonder as the seed absorbed nutrients and began early cellular division. When the chamber's lullaby tones ceased, the system shifted to maintenance mode. The interior lights dimmed to a calm violet. Vesha opened her eyes and looked at Elias with warmth. He nodded to her. She whispered, "Ainalor is safe." Elias smiled and spoke in common intergalactic tongue. "Our child is safe." Outside, the chamber, Dr. Malik tapped her console. She said, "The embryo will grow here for the next 8 cycles, then we can transfer it to an artificial womb on the station." Naomi typed notes. She nodded at Elias through the glass. Vesha and Elias stepped from the chamber onto the softly glowing platform. Elias took Vesha's hands in his. She wrapped 2 of her arms around his waist in gratitude. Elias held her gently. She rested her head on his chest. That evening, in a quiet lounge on the station, Elias and Vesha sat side by side on a low couch. Through a panoramic window, stars sparkled against the black void. Elias had arranged for a small meal of Terran fruits, Thalari paste, and crunchy hydroponic greens. They ate slowly in silence, savoring the moment. Vesha's filaments glowed softly as she tilted her head to look at Elias. She spoke one word in slow Thalari. "Mara." Elias tapped his chest and tapped his data book where he had written, Mera, our friend. He replied with a gentle smile and tapped Mera on his wrist device. Then Elias spoke. You are my friend. You are my family. Vesha's eyes shone, with tears. She placed her hand on his cheek. Elias leaned his forehead against hers. They shared a quiet moment of love and hope. In the final hours before they prepared to return to Aurora's light, Elias updated his log. Day 101, hybrid. Embryo formed. Vesha and I performed the union of necessity. Consortium staff will care for embryo. Future secured. He closed the log file and looked at Vesha. She stood at the viewport, watching the distant glow of Proxima's star. Elias stood behind her and placed his hands on her arms. He said softly, Our journey continues. Vesha turned and smiled. She rested her head on his shoulder. As they left the station to return to the ship, Elias felt a deep sense of purpose. He and Vesha had crossed the boundaries between species, language, and culture. In their union, they had found hope for a new life and a new era of understanding. Back aboard the Aurora's light, Elias guided the ship out of orbit. Vesha went to the medical bay to check on the hydroponic bay she had built. She whispered, to the moss, Grow for our child. Elias watched her from the doorway, proud and determined. On the journey home, under the silent watch of distant stars, a single crystalline seed pulsed within its vessel, a living promise that compassion could conquer despair. In the vast expanse of space, humanity and Thalari now shared a child. Their future had begun,